Welcome back to Honda Garage, Idaho. In today's video, we're back with our 2011 Honda Fit. We're going to be looking at the rear suspension, how to remove and replace the rear springs or shocks. This vehicle has almost 270,000 miles on it, so it's about time that I go through and change those out. So today we're going to look at the fairly straightforward and quick process of getting down, dropping the rear axle out a little bit, and replacing those components. Let's get started. Now, before we even jack the car up or do anything underneath, we're going to look inside the trunk here for these two plastic covers. There's one on each side that cover over the top of the shock mount. So we're going to take just a plastic trim removal tool or a flathead screwdriver. There's a little notch right in this corner that we can use to pop these covers out and access the top of our strut. So on the top of our factory shock, we can insert a 5mm Allen key. Even with the weight of the vehicle down, there's a good chance this will spin if the nut is seized. So we're going to use this to hold the shock in place while we twist the nut the other direction. This is going to take a 14mm wrench. This one on the other side ended up being seized pretty hard. After using some PP Blaster, I also put a jack under the axle, relieve any excess pressure on the nut that I could, and then utilize some tools to take it off. End up damaging the nut in the process, and the new shock that you purchased doesn't come with one. Here's Honda's official part number. I was able to finally break it loose with my impact. If worst comes to worst, you can use an angle grinder or something from below to cut the shock shaft in half and lift the top out. Once the nuts on top of the shocks are loose but not fully removed, we're going to lift up the vehicle enough to remove the wheels. That way our axle doesn't completely fall out. After removing the wheel, but before we drop the axle down, we also need to protect this wire here for the wheel speed sensor. There's a bracket back here behind the drum brake and one up here on the inside of the wheel well with rubber grommets. We're going to just pull both of those out. And that'll just help us avoid any crazy tension on this wire once the axle is loose and hanging freely. This would be the only other thing holding it up to the car. With both the wheels out of the way and the wiring disconnected, we can go ahead and jack the beam back upward a little bit to relieve some pressure on those top nuts. With the nut removed, we can also take off this washer. Just keep in mind that the tiny raised lip faces upward, and we'll save that for the reinstall later. And then we can release our jack and let them fall all the way out, just like so. Now, just for demonstration, I still have the wheel installed on the other side, but here's what I mean when the shock drops out through that top hole here. If the top is not connected, once you start lifting the body up, the rear axle is just going to keep swinging downward because there's nothing pinning it up to the chassis. So leave the nut on top there, remove your wheels first, and then take the last few threads of the nut off so that this can slide down and your whole axle will hang free. Now that those aren't hanging onto anything, the axle is just sort of free floating here. There's nothing really supporting it. It's just hanging down by the bushings right here on the front. So to get our springs out, all we have to do is really pull these from their two seats here. We can just push them down a little bit, push that axle downward. That gives us enough clearance to pop the spring out of its base right there and lift it off its position on the axle. The factory springs here have two rubber seats. If you're installing an aftermarket coilover kit or something like that, it'll probably come with different seats to use on the top and bottom here. So follow the instructions with your kit for that actual installation. Regarding the shock tube, to remove it, there's just one 14mm bolt down here that we're going to take out. The heads are on the inside of the vehicle. And with that bolt loosened up, we can pull those out here. And then the bottom of the shock mount just slides out from this position in the axle. Okay, so here's a quick comparison for you. This is the shock that we just removed. It still has the bump stop underneath this plastic, and it's got the washer up here. I did remove the rubber bushing on top. And then there's this collar, and as you can see, there's a little punched spot in here that actually prevents it from being fully removed off these threads. I've got another one here from my 2009 Fit that I took off so I can show you. There's a flat right here that punched notch goes in. So you're not going to be able to slide that collar off and get the rest of this hardware out. Now, all the replacement shocks that I've seen for the rear, OEM style ones from KYB, Monroe, stuff like that, as well as aftermarket ones like Coney or full coilover kits, will come with all the hardware you need for the new shocks, pre-assembled all the way up through the collars. Most of them even come with the bushings, and they all have a brand new nut for the top as well. So you shouldn't need to worry about porting any of your hardware from the old ones over. If you do need to, you can drill out this punched notch right here. Just drill a hole in there until this collar can slide free, transfer it all over to the new strut. And once you've done that, if you have to, or you've got your new ones opened up, we can get them reinstalled in the vehicle. Now, for some reason, you do need to get these off to reuse on the replacement shocks, and you don't want to drill in here. You can also look for sleeve bearings. Honda doesn't sell this part separately, and I don't think it's structural, but if you have to replace it and you want something new, look for sleeve bearings with an outer diameter of 14 millimeters, an inside diameter of 10 millimeters, and you need a total of 41 millimeters of length. I have some 20 millimeter ones here, so I might just stack 2 of them. I think these are mostly for centering the bushings, and the washers themselves take all the load. So I'm not super concerned about having a hole here structurally, but if you feel better about it, you can get some bearings like this if you have to replace this part and can't find an option. Okay, so the reinstallation is just the reverse of the removal. We're going to get the bottom of our shock lined up down in the axle here. And reinstall our factory bolt through the side. And this lower bolt on each side is going to get torqued to 40 foot-pounds. Next up, we'll make sure our springs are in position on both sides before we start to recompress the suspension. You'll notice these may look a little different. I'm going to be lifting this fit, so stay tuned for the next video on that process. For now, with everything roughly in place, we're going to start to compress the suspension a little bit. Once we've lifted it up a little ways, we can actually grab this by hand and pull it back down, compress it slightly, and then realign it with our shock hole in the frame. We can do this for both sides, kind of step by step as we lift it up. Make sure our bushing is centered. With that compressed enough to see the top, we can reinstall our other rubber bushing. I popped mine out just so that the rod didn't push it up and underneath this plastic during the reinstallation. Then we'll reinstall our washer and the new nut that came with our shock. Okay, we'll torque this down later. It's going to get put down to 22 foot-pounds, but we'll do that after everything is back on the ground. Before we reinstall our tire, don't forget to reconnect the grommets with the wire for the wheel speed sensor. With the nuts reinstalled, we can just put our plastic covers back on, snap them back into place. And that's really all there is to it. I haven't covered really anything in terms of lowering the vehicle. I do have Swift springs and Coney shocks on my other vehicle, but this isn't really intended to cover coilovers. You should get detailed instructions with whatever kit you buy, so just make sure you follow those really closely step by step. I also usually recommend getting an alignment after messing with suspension, but on the second generation Fit, there is pretty much nothing you can do in terms of adjusting the alignment on the rear axle, so not a huge concern there. Otherwise, it's super straightforward to access and remove those springs and shocks. So I hope the video I showed today was helpful for you. Let me know what modifications you've made on your Fit and what you'd like to see modified or repaired next on mine. And as always, thank you so much for watching.